Good evening, students. First, I want to talk about the midterm. Midterm is was here, and you should be. If you didn't take it yet, you should be taking it. You can see from the midterm, it's more of a learning tool. To me, it's not about getting answers right or wrong. It's about learning what I want you to take with you when you leave this class. So I covered quite a few items that I believe are important that you should take when you go on to the next class, or that you take with you, more importantly, when you leave college. Secondly, pat yourself on the back a little bit. We're halfway through, believe it or not. The semester's halfway over, your midterm. We're at week 6. You should have an outline of your research project, trying to get that completed. It's getting warmer every day. And it doesn't seem like it was 30s over the weekend, but as it gets warmer, you're not going to want to work on it. So try to work a page or two on it a night. Try to get your ideas together and get them on a outline. What I always do is I make an outline, my introduction, my main body, and then my conclusion. And I'll start filling in an outline, and I'll start putting sentences in that outline, because it's easy for me to do it that way. So just a small pointer. So tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 6, the disciplines of emergency management, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the response to a disaster. So we're going to talk about different types of responses. And when we talk about responses, we're talking about who's going to respond. Is it going to be local, state, or federal response? If you remember, now we're talking about responses depending on what type of your incident you're responding to. If you remember the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995, it's a little bit of a different, there's a caveat there. That was a federal building with federal jurisdiction. So, but if you remember, it overwhelmed, probably most of you, if not all of you, don't remember. That you're not old enough. I do. I was finishing up college, just starting my career in law enforcement when this happened. It was quite a scene, I can tell you, from seeing it on the television. So when we talk about responses, our sponsors are going to be the first people that obviously are going to respond to any incident is the local agencies. Now, when I say local, we're talking about our local police department, our local fire department, and our local emergency services. So we will respond and assess the situation, obviously depending on the incident, such as the Morrow building blowing up. It obviously overwhelmed Oklahoma almost immediately. If you think about 9/11, as big as the New York City Police Department and the fire department and the EMS, they were overwhelmed almost instantly. So we look at our local partners, which is the primary jurisdiction. Most, if not all, of our emergency incidents are handled at the local level. When we talk about that, we'll talk about all different types of responses, from flood response to normally we deal with snow response on a yearly basis, depending on what your municipality has, flooding incidents, whether it's a power outage due to a telephone pole or something of that nature. It's always handled by the local municipalities, and that's where most of them stop. Most of the incidents that we deal with. In East Pennsboro, we do have an emergency an emergency operations center, where if we do declare an emergency, we will man the command post with our fire department, EMS, and police department. It's a cooperative effort. and we'll man that command center and deal with whatever local issues that we have. I remember it's probably been 2 years ago. I remember I was on patrol. We had a power outage, and it was a massive storm that hit, and it was a power outage. So we had to man the telephone lines because obviously the 911 center was down with power. So we were manning lines and answering phones. Just recently, the phones went down. I think it was 3 weeks ago. The phone line went down. So we had to man the phones at the police station 24/7 in case someone called. Our next partners in an incident where we can't handle is our state agency. Obviously, here in Pennsylvania, it's a Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. When you see the governor get on and declare a state of emergency, he places emergency orders in effect, such as the highways are now speed limits 45 miles per hour. I don't know why that's so important. If you're driving like an idiot on the highway, when you have 12 inches of snow over 45 miles an hour, I don't know who's out there running speed. But anyhow, interstates are down to 45 miles an hour. Okay, you can't even drive over 30. But our state agencies come in, whether it's the state police, whether it's a PA National Guard, whether those troops come in and help us, such as the response up on I-78 when there was a backlog of traffic in a snowstorm. We had to evacuate people from their vehicles because they were stuck and running out of gas in a blizzard condition. We couldn't get the lanes open for people to move, so we just had to leave I-78 closed and evacuate people to the local hotels until we could get back in there to handle that situation. We work very well with our state partners. We have an emergency operations center that's located in Harrisburg, and that operations center runs when there's declared of a state of emergency. It'll open up. I think it's on Crooked Hill Road, somewhere in that area, over near the Farm Show building. So we do have a command center. And in that command center, and what we run is called the Incident Command System. You're going to start hearing more about that. We talked about it a little bit last week. So we have a command section or a center, an emergency operations center that we run, so that we don't have, the fire department here, the police department over here, and we have EMS over here, and nobody's coordinating any of the efforts to handle the situation. So we meet in a centralized location, an EOC, Emergency Operations Center, at which point we will handle that incident. There's 5 major systems of the ICS. The first one is a command section. The command section is developing, directing, and maintaining communication and collaboration with multiple agencies on site, working with the local officials, the public, and the media to provide up-to-date information regarding the disaster. So I like to think of the command center as the brain. We have it in a special operations center. When we do SRT team, we have a command post that we set up away from the incident where we have intelligence and things like that going on. So in this EOC center is the command post or the command section. And it's basically people bringing in information to the command center, updating information. Fire, police, EMS is updating the command center. The command center is putting information out either through social media or through the media itself, the news agencies, to try to help deal with the situation at hand, whether it be power outage or whether it be a terrorist attack or something of that nature. Now, the operations section of that command post handles the tactical operations. It coordinates the command objectives. So the objective is to keep the roadways open. Let's just say we're trying to get roadways open from down trees, down power lines. How do we reroute around that disaster area? Remember, we're still responding to police, fire, and EMS calls. So just because we have a major incident going on, we just don't stop responding to domestic disputes. We don't stop responding to Granny down the street who has a heart issue, and the command post is in charge of getting EMS to that EMS call or that police call, and how to get around and get to that call without being stopped. So it directs all the disasters. Okay, the operations center. The planning section provides necessary information to the command center to develop an action plan to accomplish the objectives. This section also collects and evaluates information as is made available. So, as we're updating, as we're getting updates from PP&L that their crews are on the way, and we have, 4 more hours of dark, do we have all of what are our plans now? What if it's an extended disaster where we have to it'll go a day or two? I remember in Marysville during a storm, we were out of power for 3 days. How do I handle that situation as a resident with no power? Did the fire department come down and say, hey, you can stay at our fire department. We're evacuating people. You have no power. If it's cold, you can come up and stay at the fire department where it's warm. Logistics section provides personnel, equipment, and support to the command center. So they're providing all the tools and resources that we need, whether it's additional officers, whether it's additional fire equipment, whether it's additional EMS personnel, whatever it is. We use volunteer organizations like the Red Cross. If we have power outages for an extended period of time, or we have people meeting at the fire department because their power is out, we'll use the Red Cross. How can we, as a law enforcement agency or a municipality, we don't have those services? It's not like we have a food truck. It's not like we can feed and clothe and give people drinks from the police department, the fire department, or the EMS. None of us have those resources. So we call upon these volunteer organizations to help us deal with whatever disaster is in effect. Remember, we got to feed our own personnel as well. We have to feed all the officers and EMS and firefighters. We just don't run on fun. We have to eat as well. And the last section is the financial section. It's responsible for accounting the funds used during the response and the recovery aspect of the disaster. Who's paying for all this? Who's documenting what we're using? Who's going out and buying resources? Who's going out and buying food? And where's that money coming from? Remember, local agencies don't have deep pockets. It's not like, we got tens of thousands of dollars. This COVID epidemic put local resources just at a standstill. We had half our police department out with COVID. How are we going to keep the remaining officers to have enough officers to handle calls? Mind you, in the criminal investigation section, we still have more crime taking place, more sex assaults, more robberies, more burglaries. So we still have to handle all of those calls. It's not like we say, whoa, time out. You can't commit crime. We're on a pandemic here. We still have to handle those resources. And financially, how do we do it? So those are some of the things that we look at. How big is the incident that we're dealing with? Is this a single incident command where we deal with just a single episode? Or is a unified command where the entire West Shore was out of power? Do we turn around and ask the state to take over the EOC centers for all the departments on the West Shore so that we can free up some manpower to help handle the situation? So we're going to talk a lot about the incident command system. Remember, the incident command system, there's one leader, and we try to put all of that information together to get what resources we need to handle the situation. You see FEMA, they declare a state of emergency. When Donald Trump came in and declared a disaster emergency for the COVID epidemic, we were able to cut through a lot of the red tape because it was a declared disaster. So we were able to, like the COVID vaccines, they didn't go through some of the FDA regulations. They were sent out before some of the testing needed to be done. So what is also, think about our roadways, think about our infrastructure. Remember, if we lose power, we lose an entire, if you remember, a tanker tractor hit 322 bridge over by Harrisburg and caught on fire. 10,000 gallons of fuel was on fire, and you can see it on the internet. That was actually pretty neat, but it burnt the bridge completely, bent the girders. So that was down for 9 months. Now you think about it, they replaced a bridge in 9 months. That's not bad. But they declared it a disaster. The federal government came in, helped us with resources and funding, and they actually built that bridge back rather quickly. It was a single incident that caused a lot of problems infrastructure-wise to the mid-state in Harrisburg. It was a mess for 9 months trying to reroute that traffic. And how do we do that safely over a 9-month period? So those are some of the stuffs that we may need to respond to. I did want to touch on a couple other things. Depending on who's in charge, it could be the governor. As we saw, Governor Wolf has been key in shutting things down in this disaster, the COVID-19 disaster. And a lot of that stuff was fought through the courts, and the courts ruled that the governor could do that because he declared a state of emergency. So, there was a lot of backlash that the governor took because of the steps that he had taken to close down businesses to keep the spread of the pandemic at a minimum. We have local chiefs. We have the Secretary of Homeland Security, the FEMA Administrator, the Attorney General, Secretary of State, depending on the incident. If it's a incident that is international, if you saw I don't know if you watched the news, the incident that's taking place now, critical incident took place this week. I don't know if you've been watching, but I have. The entire Northeast is shut down for fuel, diesel, on a pipeline coming from Louisiana all the way up the eastern seaboard to New Jersey, which brings 45% of the fuel resources from the south to the north simply by hacking into their computers. Major infrastructure issues. Like, here you are running a multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar fuel, and they simply, it wasn't the Russians, it was people in Russia, they've identified them, hacked into the system and shut the pipeline down. Who's paying for it? I don't know about you, but I woke up the next day and the wife's like, holy cow, the fuel went up 15 cents a gallon overnight, and it's going to get worse over the next week. They're hoping to have it back up shortly. But guess who's paying for this disaster? You are. You're paying at the pump. If you saw, President Biden came out today, declared an emergency that fuel tanker trucks, basically with impunity, can drive from Louisiana to the Northeast to give us the fuel supplies that we need to run the country. Remember, if we run out of fuel, we run out of power. We run out of a lot of things. So think about Homeland Security's involved in this, and the FBI investigating who shut down this pipeline. It's a disaster. Everybody's responding to it at this time. So you just saw in the last week what what took place. If you haven't seen it, please, go back and look it up at your spare time on the internet about the fuel coming to the Northeast. I've been watching it on the news. I don't like to watch a whole lot of news because it kind of I get sick of watching people getting shots. Does that bug anybody else? Sorry to jump off topic, but they're talking about COVID-19 vaccinations. They just keep sticking people with needles and sticking people. I hate that because I don't like needles, and I certainly don't like watching that. Finally, one of the big resources that we use, but we rarely use them, is the United States military. We call on our National Guard and services to do certain things, like the disaster was declared in Washington, D.C. We have our troops down there. The first couple weeks living in a parking garage, and we're putting illegal immigrants in hotels. That caused a little bit of a backlash. How do we... So when we asked the government asked for our troops to go into D.C. to protect D.C., do you think that the federal government was prepared to bring 10,000 troops into Washington, D.C.? Totally unprepared. Totally unprepared. And I'm not blaming President Biden. It could have been any president. But when you have guard troops living in the streets, or you have guard troops living in parking garages, you didn't have the resources that you needed available for those troops to handle that situation. So I'm not blaming him, because it was FEMA's responsibility to be able to handle those troops coming into that area and handling the situation and making sure that you have the resources on the ground to handle that emergency. And I think they're still there. Don't quote me on that, because, like I said, the news kind of got getting a little crazy. I don't really watch the news much anymore because I get sick of the COVID-19 crap on TV. That's about all I want to cover in Chapter 6. Make sure that you read it. You do have some homework assignments and some journals that are due, and discussion boards that are due this week. Hang in there. You're halfway through the week. Yeah, halfway through the week. Halfway through the semester. We're almost there. You basically got some homework assignments. You have a midterm and final. Everyone's doing very well in class. I've enjoyed a lot of journals. I've enjoyed reading homework assignments. They seem to be very spot on, and you guys are doing excellent work. So keep up the good work, and have a great week.